Palestinian resistance groups launch a new volley of rockets into Israeli settlements in retaliation for Israeli aggressions. The Iraqi government disputes a video posted online purporting to show the so-called leader of the Islamic State, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And the self-defense forces of the Donetsk People's Republic confirmed leaving the eastern Ukrainian city of Slavyansk after a devastating shelling. This is Al-Ittijah World News. I'm Zainab Alawi. The Palestinian resistance group Hamas has fired a fresh volley of rockets into Israeli settlements in retaliation for incessant Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip. Up to 18 rockets were launched from Gaza, likely wounding an Israeli soldier in the southern occupied territories after Israeli warplanes carried out airstrikes against the coastal enclave. Israeli air raids targeted the airport in southern Gaza, causing extensive damage. And the brutal killing of Muhammad Abu Khudayr, a 16-year-old Palestinian from the holy city of Al-Quds, has awakened quiescent anger across occupied Palestine as clashes between Israeli occupation forces stretched into the night.
The flames of a Palestinian intifada, or uprising, are burning ardently in the West Bank, all set to reduce years of relative calm to ashes. Overnight clashes between Israeli occupation forces and Palestinian protesters flared in villages near the holy city of Al-Quds following the burial of a 16-year-old Palestinian who was abducted and killed by extremist Israeli settlers. Fearing a third intifada may be brewing, the Israelis beefed up their presence in Al-Quds as they deployed 10,000 Israeli troops. Zionist forces made various arrests and wounded at least 7 people during confrontations in the Triangle district, which continued to witness sporadic protests. Thousands of Palestinians attended the funeral of Muhammad Abu Khudayr, who was tortured and killed earlier this week. Initial autopsy findings from his body show that he was burned alive. But Israeli atrocities do not end there. A video showing Israeli police nearly beating up Tariq Abu Khudayr to death during protests has been released. The 15-year-old American citizen is the cousin of the slain teenager whose killing sparked outrage across occupied Palestine.
Why you hit a boy, 15 years old, in this way, and you let him to stay in a police station from 8 o'clock till 8 o'clock evening, till 1 o'clock after midnight without any medical treatment? Why?
It did go through my head that he could have been murdered like his cousin.
Israeli occupation forces have used tear gas, stun grenades, and live ammunition to disperse protesters whose anger is boiling and could eventually explode into an uprising against the ongoing aggressions of their occupiers.
Amid growing tensions in Palestine's occupied territories, 12 more EU states have joined European heavyweights such as the UK, Germany, and France in urging their citizens against investing in illegal Israeli settlements built in the occupied West Bank. However, the decision has failed to deter the Zionists who have vowed to continue with its settlement expansion policy.
Ignoring all international conventions and progressing with its expansionist policy, the Israeli regime continues to approve the construction of thousands of illegal settlements on Palestinian land. Now, the EU has realized that these violations represent a genuine threat to its own interests. Following the steps of the continent's 5 business heavyweights, an additional 12 EU states have urged their nationals to refrain from business activities in Israeli settlements built in the occupied West Bank. European governments have warned their citizens that purchasing or investing in the region implies legal and economic risks. Israeli settlements are illegal under international law, constitute an obstacle to peace and threaten to make a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict impossible. The EU and its member states will not recognize any changes to the pre-1967 borders, including with regard to Jerusalem, other than those agreed by the parties. But the Israeli entity is taking no heed of all these warnings. The Zionist regime has made it clear that its illegal settlement policy will not change. The warning has come with action. 1,500 more illegal settlement units have been approved, while the overall construction rose by 123% in 1 year alone, indicating that the Israelis have no intention of suspending their aggressive actions against Palestinians.
Bertrand Watson, a journalist and a political analyst, and he said that as long as Washington fails to recognize the illegality of Israeli settlements on occupied Palestinian territory, the unrest will only intensify.
Shortly after the signing of the agreement of Fatah and Hamas to create a government of unity, all of a sudden happens this presumed kidnapping of 3 Israeli nationals in the occupied territories. I think it's a real interest on breaking this government of unity, because for Israel it's actually very easy to commit with Fatah, which at this point has become its best ally in the region, and not with a Hamas presence, which represents a total discrepancy with the two-state solution even. They actually go for a one-state solution possibility, and they just want to finish Hamas. They want to finish Hamas in Gaza, like it's been shown in the past nights with all the raids, with all the bombings, and they want to finish by arresting all the leaders also in the West Bank. Palestine, the big majority are with the Palestinians' interests. It's just, obviously, we have one member that has the right of veto, and that's the one that defends the interests of Israel at all times, which is the United States. As long as the United States keeps on defending in whatever circumstance, and as we can see now with this turmoil that is going on now, with these atrocities that are being committed, with these bombings non-stop of Gaza, and the arrest of hundreds and hundreds of people, and the closing down the cities in the West Bank, as long as the United States does not want to see what the rest of the world sees, this turmoil is going to continue. But I think more and more pressure is put in the United States. Even John Kerry has said recently that the Israelis will have to really watch it. And as I said before about this BDS boycott campaign against Israel, John Kerry has already warned the Israelis that is a plan B against Israel, and that Israel should better watch it, because if the negotiations like it happened have no future whatsoever, it is a campaign that already put down and knocked down another very strong apartheid nation, another racist nation, that it was South Africa, and it can eventually happen the same with Israel.
Now, the Iraqi government has shut down claims that a video posted online purporting to show the reclusive leader of the extremist militant group Islamic State praying in the northern city of Mosul as falsified.
Only hours after a video showing Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi went viral online, the Iraqi government rejected the notion that the man shown giving a Friday sermon is in fact an imposter and not the reclusive leader of the Al-Qaeda offshoot group. Interior Ministry spokesman General Saad Mann told reporters that the footage posted on the internet allegedly showing al-Baghdadi at Mosul's Grand Mosque was not him. We have analyzed the footage and found it is farce. The video is indisputably not al-Baghdadi. Ma'an said government forces had recently wounded al-Baghdadi in an airstrike and that he had been transferred by Islamic State militants to Syria for medical treatment. The 21-minute video came after reports on social media said that al-Baghdadi would make his first public appearance since the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant changed its name to the Islamic State and declared him as a caliph, a title held by successors of the Prophet Muhammad.
I am the leader who presides over you, though I am not the best of you. So if you see that I am right, assist me. If you see that I am wrong, advise me and put me on the right track, and obey me as long as I obey God in you. God gave your Mujahideen brothers victory after long years of jihad and patience, so they declared the caliphate and placed the caliph in charge. This is a duty on Muslims that has been lost for centuries.
The self-proclaimed caliph of a state straddling Iraq and Syria is increasingly seen as more powerful and dangerous than Al-Qaeda's leader. His militants overran Iraq's second largest city of Mosul on June 10th in an offensive that saw vast parts of northern Iraq fall to the Islamic State and allied groups.
Meanwhile, Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has insisted he will not relinquish his post as fighting over the next government in Iraq heats up in the deeply fractured nation.
Despite sharp criticism from various political parties in Iraq and pressure from foreign powers to step down, Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki announced that he is determined to seek a third term in office. In a statement read on Iraqi state TV, al-Maliki was quoted as saying, "I say with determination and with firm resolve that I will remain loyal to the Iraqi people and I will never give up my candidacy for the post of Prime Minister. The State of Law coalition is the biggest bloc and it has the right to the Prime Minister post, and no other bloc has the right to impose conditions." The current Premier received over 1 million votes in May's parliamentary elections, while his State of Law coalition garnered 96 seats in Parliament, the most by a long margin. Reaction to al-Maliki's intention to remain as Prime Minister was positive on the streets of Baghdad.
People have elected the Prime Minister because he is an honest man and because he has achieved many things for the Iraqi people, despite setbacks and an outside agenda and attempts by some parties to create problems. We are a democratic country, therefore everyone has to acknowledge the voters' vote.
However, with extremists biting off a huge chunk of northern Iraq and the Kurds using the current crisis to enforce their position in disputed territories, some believe that al-Maliki's plan to remain in power will be a dividing factor in the country.
If the Prime Minister gets a third term, Iraq will be divided and the problems will further increase because he has opponents among the political blocs. He has done nothing to the Iraqi people over the past years. Sectarian killings are rife. The security situation has deteriorated during his past 2 terms. He has done nothing.
While the premiership is being widely discussed in Iraq, the parliament, which held its first session on Tuesday, is yet to elect a parliament speaker, as wrangling over who will obtain the country's top posts, including the presidency, will likely rage for weeks, if not months, to come.
And on the ground, the Iraqi army's operation aimed at regaining control of territory lost to extremists is well underway. The military has made a huge stride in maintaining control in the central Salahuddin province as fighting rages on in several parts north of the country. Our Baghdad correspondent Rihab Rikabi filed this following report.
Backed up by tanks, artilleries and heavy aerial cover and beefed up by pro-government militias, Iraqi armed forces are making tactical battlefield successes. Over the past few days, Iraqi government could recapture large parts of Salahuddin province that have been seized in a dramatic militant blitz across the country in early June. Beji, where the country's largest oil refinery lies, and the small town of Ishaqi, southeast of Samarra, are now under the control of the government, and the Iraqi security forces are now patrolling the road that links the city to Baghdad and the cities of Tikrit and Mosul further north. Samarra, home to the revered Al-Askari shrine, has been also secured. though the Islamic State militants attempted to take control of the city twice in recent days and threatened to destroy the shrine in their desperate bid to ignite a sectarian Shia-Sunni strife throughout the country. And in the past 2 days, Iraqi armed forces could regain the village of Oja, 8 kilometers south of Tikrit. Up to 30 Islamic State militants were killed. And just yesterday, warplanes carried out several air raids against Islamic State militants who were trying to capture the country's largest oil refinery, Beji, killing as many as 30 militants. The Iraqi army is now continuing with its day-long airstrikes on militant positions in Tikrit after taking control of the sprawling campus of Tikrit University, the 4th Infantry Division headquarters, and Speicher military base. To a large extent, volunteers who took up arms against Islamic State militants in response to call to arms by Iraq's most senior cleric Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani contributed to the progress made against the militant groups.
We responded to call to arms by Al-Marja'iyah to show support to Iraqi army, and we are ready to secure our lives in the battlefield to defeat the militants. I joined the volunteers units to defend my country, and here I am taking heavy arms training classes by military officers. We are ready to battle the militants in the defiance of our country.
Additionally, many stress that Iraq should remain one piece alongside the national armed forces in the face of the militant offensive, as this would be the most effective remedy for the ongoing crisis.
I think over the last couple of weeks, the Iraqi army have pulled up themselves and took the initiative to attack the militants in different areas. But to succeed, we need a community understanding of the situation. We need all Iraqis to come together and to agree that terrorism is refused by all Iraqis, and that there will be no discrimination against any Iraqi by the government or by any political bloc. Otherwise, there will always be a security breach here and there, and whatever capacity we have at the security-wise, it won't be able to defeat terrorism in Iraq.
Furthermore, clashes continued between the Iraqi security forces and the Islamic State militants attempting to move into the small town of Al-Nibai to the south of Al-Dijil in Salahuddin province, 135 kilometers north of Baghdad. Security sources said that the militants were trying to take refuge in the vast farms of Al-Nibai town, escaping from the intense bombardment by the Iraqi government forces. But the people of the town who took up arms could prevent militant success into those areas. Rihab Rikabi, Al-Ittijah, Baghdad.
And to elaborate more on the latest developments in Iraq, we have Sabah Jawad, a political analyst based in the British capital of London. Mr. Jawad, good to have you with us today. So let's start off with this video showing the so-called Islamic leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi making his first public appearance. Now, the Iraqi government has disputed the video and said the footage is fabricated. What do you think?
Well, it doesn't look like Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi anyway. From the known pictures of him, it could be a reply actually to the statement by the Iraqi government that he was wounded and was taken to Syria for medical treatments. And it could be kind of like a show of force, and in reply to the outcry, his caliphate declaration was met by including some Sunni scholars like Al-Qaradawi and others as well. And that's basically shaken some Arab governments, especially in the Gulf area and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and other Gulf Cooperation Council states as well. So it could be kind of like a show of force to declare that actually we are here, we are on the ground, and we are in a positions to control things and create things in occupied Iraq.
Well, why would the extremist leader remain hidden from the public?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Why would the extremist leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi remain hidden from the public? Why does the Iraqi government think that this video is fabricated?
Well, what I'm saying actually is the opposite. That you want to, probably there is a truth in the story that he was wounded, and therefore he could not be, be shown or doing anything. This is probably a fabricated video, or at least a video of somebody else who is claiming to be Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
Okay, so now on the political front, Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki insists on going ahead for a third term as Prime Minister. Does this mean that he is prepared to take on the challenges in Iraq?
Well, he's quite prepared to take this up, the challenge. Especially, he could claim actually that he was elected. No matter what you think about the election process and the political process that we have in Iraq, he is the owner of the biggest bloc in the Iraqi parliament. He's got more than 90 seats, and he could forge an alliance with some other parties, including some smaller Sunni groups as well. And he could form the government. But however, I mean, if we are going to have a repeat of the last election, where we have a situation where an agreement was reached on the Prime Minister and the President and the leader of the parliament, but at the same time the government did not work at all. We have a political system in Iraq which is not working. We have institutions in Iraq is not working. Parliament is not working. The cabinet is not working. The presidential office is not working as well. And sometimes actually there are conflicts between them. There are conflicts within the one government as well. So a repeat of that formula is going to bring disasters in Iraq. However, this time the Americans are back. The occupation of Nineveh allowed the Americans to go back to Iraq after they withdrew from Iraq, and they were forced to leave Iraq. Now they are back in the forms of maybe about 600 advisors and so on. Therefore, they will think they could control the political system and make it work. They might bring some heads and bang them together, or organize some kind of coup d'etat and get rid of al-Maliki like they did with Ibrahim al-Ja'fari before him.
Well, why is the Iraqi parliament unable to reach an agreement over the formation of a new government, especially at this crucial time that Iraq is going through?
Well, there's so many conflicting agendas in Iraq. Actually, there's local agendas, and the local politicians, they take orders from Saudi Arabia. Some take orders from Saudi Arabia, some from Qatar, and most of them take orders from the Americans as well. This is what the Americans wanted to achieve in Iraq. They wanted to have a divided country, conflicting country between. It's a formula of disaster. What the American did is the constitution is like an incubator of problems in Iraq in the future as well. And the political system is also like that. Then you have the Kurdish leadership, which is hell-bent on opposing the central government, is making the central government is almost reluctant, redundant in many ways. Iraqi oil is sold in the open market by the Kurdish entities, and the Iraqi forces are not allowed to go to Kurdistan. They're not allowed to do anything in Kurdistan. I mean, Kurdistan is an independent country by all means except the declarations. And this is what the American created, and these powers who are trying to make Iraq ungovernable are basically the American and their stooges in the area.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us today there, Mr. Sabah Jawad, a political analyst. Stay with us here on Al-Ittijah World News. Still to come. Egypt raises fuel prices by up to 78%. Welcome back. Our top stories are: Palestinian resistance groups launch a new volley of rockets into Israeli settlements in retaliation for Israeli aggressions. The Iraqi government disputes a video posted online purporting to show the so-called leader of the Islamic State, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And the self-defense forces of the Donetsk People's Republic confirmed leaving the eastern Ukrainian city of Slavyansk after a devastating shelling. Self-defense forces from the Donetsk People's Republic have reportedly abandoned their main stronghold in the eastern Ukrainian city of Slavyansk, as Kiev troops hoisted the Ukrainian flag over the pro-Russian rebels' main stronghold, following a devastating shelling campaign that leveled much of the city.
This is crisis-hit Slavyansk, the symbolic heart of an uprising claimed by the Russian-speaking people of eastern Ukraine and the fortress of its self-defense militia. And according to Ukraine's interior minister, self-defense rebels and their top commander have fled their main eastern bastion in what would be Kiev's biggest gain in the nearly 3-month campaign.
Reconnaissance units of Ukraine's armed forces and National Guard are operating in Slavyansk. Ukraine president gave an order to restore functioning of state institutions in Slavyansk and to raise national flag on the city administration building.
Kiev has described the developments as a success, while pro-Russian rebels say the advance is part of a relentless shelling campaign and sniper fire that have since killed more than 470 people and left the population frustrated after several ceasefire failures. The self-proclaimed mayor of Slavyansk confirmed to AFP that the rebels had abandoned the industrial city of 120,000 people. Russia's Channel 1 reported that there was massive shelling and armored vehicles entered Slavyansk, sparking street fighting. That's when the self-defense forces took the decision to leave the city in order to protect the civilian population. Also, clashes in the economically vital border regions of Luhansk and Donetsk have picked up, with a renewed drive since President Petro Poroshenko terminated a 10-day ceasefire agreement earlier this week. His decision was immediately followed by the launch of a massive offensive by Kiev that led President Vladimir Putin to warn that Russia had the right to protect its compatriots in Ukraine. However, in what is believed to be a change of heart, Poroshenko reportedly called pro-Russian rebels to organize a meeting. This has yet to be confirmed by either Moscow or mediators from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. For now, though, it appears that the ongoing crisis in eastern Ukraine has not ended, but rather shifted to what some locals believe to Donetsk. Whatever the case may be, the latest diplomatic efforts have a long way to go before calm is restored in the rest of the region.
To get some more analysis on this, we have Manuel Ochsenreiter, a journalist based in Berlin. Mr. Manuel, good to have you with us. How significant is the retaking of Slavyansk by the Ukrainian authorities, and what does this mean for the pro-Russian activists?
Well, what we saw is it appears like a harmful loss for the rebels in eastern Ukraine, but I think what we saw in reality is a sort of tactical withdrawal of the armed forces of the rebels out of Slavyansk to protect the civilians, not to carry the war inside the city. But of course, it has a symbolic value because Slavyansk was giving resistance for around 4 months against the Ukrainian army. And it is a very unequal fight, what we see. We see on the one side the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army is backed by NATO, by the European Union and by the United States. And we see on the other side the rebels, the pro-Russian rebels in eastern Ukraine who are self-defense forces, the majority of them, and a couple of volunteers fighting with them. So they managed to give resistance for 4 months, what is quite a challenge to manage that.
And what kind of response can we expect from the anti-Kiev activists now? Can we expect an escalation in violence at this point?
The point is that we have right now a real war raging in Ukraine. So there is no real escalation anymore possible. The escalation is already there since Western Ukraine declared war on Eastern Ukraine. So what we will witness now is maybe that the rebel forces will regroup in other cities, of course the main cities of Lugansk and Donetsk, to prepare the defense in those centers of the rebellion.
Well, then, can we expect a similar scenario in those areas, such as Donetsk and Luhansk? Can we expect the Kiev army to take over those areas as well?
Well, I think it is not as easy for the Ukrainian army to retake those cities as it was in Slavyansk. But what, for example, wasn't today so much in media is that there were already attacks against Lugansk and that the defense of Lugansk was very successful in pushing back the Ukrainian army. So it is not as desperate as it might seem on the first glance from the rebels' view.
And do you think that there's still room for a diplomatic solution now with this relentless military campaign still ongoing?
Well, there is always room for a diplomatic solution, but diplomatic solutions have to be reliable from both sides. So what we witness now is that the Western Ukraine is giving very contradicting messages. They say on the one side they offer ceasefires, they give peaceful messages. On the other side, they push with their army, and what is much more disturbing, they push also with militias, with paramilitary units who commit terrible war crimes in those areas where they are active.
And how do you expect Moscow to respond? I mean, considering that the Kremlin has said it is ready to protect the pro-Russian civilians.
Especially Moscow is in a very, very difficult situation because on the one side they have the obligation, and they declared for themselves the obligation to protect the countrymen, the Russians in eastern Ukraine. On the other side, they are very aware of the danger because we are not speaking here about a regional conflict. We are not speaking about little parts of Ukraine which might a little bit swift away from the city. We speak about a geopolitical conflict, and Moscow is very aware of the fact that whole Ukraine is for Russia a sort of geopolitical mousetrap. So if Russia would enter in a humanitarian mission, or if they would declare a non-flight zone, if they would get in a military activity, in a military active operation on Ukrainian ground, this would be the justification and the excuse for the European Union and for the NATO to increase in a massive way the military and of course also the economical support for Western Ukraine. And it's not a conspiracy theory that the Kiev government hopes for such a step of Russia, because this would rescue Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine is a bankrupt country. The army is not very good equipped. They get now help from the West, but at the end they would need that war to keep in power and to do that for a long time.
And will the international community play any role to try and end this crisis?
They are trying already, but we have also to see what do we mean with the term international community. So until now, always when we use the term, it means always international community is a camouflage word for the West until now. So there is no real international community without Moscow. This is the most important point. And it cannot be that the West simply tries in a sort of poker game to fool Russia and to push the Kiev government. So diplomatic solution by the international community is only then possible when everybody is speaking on the same level, and this is an absolute necessity. So there can be a solution, but until now it doesn't look like that especially the West is interested in such a solution.
Okay, Manuel Ostenreiter there, a journalist based in Berlin. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, Egypt's government drastically raised fuel prices late Friday to tackle a bloated subsidy system, in a potentially unpopular move that could backfire on newly elected President Abdullah Fattah al-Sisi. Our Cairo correspondent Karim Azzeddin filed the following report.
The Egyptian government has introduced electricity and fuel price increases in a move to cut state subsidies and reduce the budget deficit. Some fuel tariffs are reported to be increasing by 78%, while electricity prices are expected to almost double over the next 5 years. Power cuts have become increasingly common in the Arab world's most populous nation. However, the government's decision has not gone down well with locals.
We've had enough. The people are fed up. We can't make a decent living, not even the minimum wage. And we can't afford to guarantee our basic needs. Enough is enough.
This will have a great impact on the poor. No one will be able to afford the basic needs anymore. There are alternative means to cover the shortage besides subsidies.
The increase in fuel prices counters everything that the people have been calling for. This is going to result in a Great Depression, as there will be no liquidity to revive the economy.
Raising energy prices by cutting subsidies could be the first test for newly elected President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who must improve state finances and revive an economy battered by more than 3 years of political turmoil. Sisi, who ousted Islamist President Mohamed Morsi last July following mass protests against his rule, took office last month and recently called on Egyptians to tighten their belts and make sacrifices to help the country get back on its feet. However, some analysts believe the price hikes should only be applied to high-income earners, stressing that the less fortunate will not be able to cope with the drastic increase in fuel prices.
The poor will be hit the hardest. This should be applied on the rich as they can afford it. Those who live in the minimum wage have had enough.
A sentiment echoed by many Egyptians.
I drive an old car. How can I afford paying double the amount for oil? I live on less than the minimum wage.
The move has already sparked widespread anger in Egypt, with motorists calling for strike action in protest against the fuel and food price hikes. For its part, the government has attempted to justify its decision by stressing that the food and energy subsidies eat up a quarter of state spending, adding that cutting off subsidies is the only way to revive the shattered economy. As the majority of Egyptians have opposed the recent increase in oil prices, the government insists that cutting off subsidies is the country's last hope to revive the shattered economy, a move that's expected to cause further complications. Reporting for Bulletin TV from Cairo, Karim Azzeddin.
An Egyptian court has sentenced Muslim Brotherhood leader Mohammed Badia and 36 other Islamists to life in prison and confirmed death sentences for 10 others, most of whom remain on the run. Badia, convicted of involvement in deadly protests, had already received death sentences in 2 other cases in a crackdown on the Islamist opposition after last year's military ouster of President Mohamed Morsi. Now off to Yemen, where a short-lived truce was broken on Saturday, as fierce clashes have once again erupted between Houthi fighters and Al-Qaeda-linked militants backed by government forces in the northern province of Amran. Our Yemeni correspondent Mohammed Al-Attab has the details.
Fierce clashes have erupted once again between Houthi fighters and Al-Qaeda-linked militants backed by the Yemeni army in the northern province of Amran, breaking yet another short-lived truce. The militants, largely comprising of local tribesmen, are believed to be linked to Al-Qaeda and supported by government troops, namely the 310 military brigades. The Yemeni army first bombarded Houthi fighters north of the capital Sana'a. Exact figures for the number of casualties are yet to be released.
The militants of Al-Qaeda, supported by the army, have breached the last ceasefire agreement which was signed under the auspices of President Hadi and the Minister of Defense. Yet Islah militants and Ali Mohsen, President's military advisor, have refused to implement such agreement and continued their attacks on the citizens of Amran.
Political observers expect that the conflict is set to last longer, this time in comparison to previous confrontations, particularly as the fresh round of fighting is more volatile. Extremist militants from different areas of Marib have attacked Houthi residents in the Al Jawf governorate, risking the expansion of the clashes.
The massive influx of Takfiri fighters in Al-Jawf supported by army forces resembles the tactics of ISIL attacks in Iraq and Syria. It seems that Takfiris in Yemen are encouraged by the advancements of their branches in Iraq, but our fighters in Al-Jawf have taught them a great lesson and has inflicted heavy losses on them.
This comes as demonstrations are being staged more frequently to call on Yemeni President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi to put an end to the bloodshed. Protesters have also demanded the president, who has been dubbed as the US's best ally in the region regarding the so-called war on terror, to denounce the growing aggression against Amran.
We took to the streets, coming from different regions of Yemen, in support with our brothers in Amran, who are being subject to the growing Takfiri aggressions, supported by the Brotherhood branch in Yemen and all traditional military leaders.
Political analysts say that with the conflict spreading out to include what is currently referred to as the federal state of Sabah, which includes Al-Jawf, Marib and Al-Bayda, all of which are oil-rich regions, Yemen's sectarian war is closely resembling what is currently taking place in Iraq, especially following the attack against a Saudi border post. With Yemen officially declaring a seventh war on Houthi fighters, observers say the Iraqi scenario could reoccur in Yemen unless the fighting sides agree on a lasting peace deal and actually implement it. Muhammad Al-Attab, Al-Ittijah TV, Sana'a.
Germany has summoned the U.S. envoy to Berlin after arresting a man on charges of spying for the U.S. over a period of years.
Germany has summoned the US ambassador in Berlin following the arrest of a man reported to have spied for the United States, heightening already strained relations between the two countries over Washington's spying activities in Germany. The German Foreign Ministry issued a statement in which it confirmed that US Ambassador John B. Emerson was summoned in connection with an investigation by the federal prosecutor, adding that the envoy was asked to help in the swift clarification of the case. German prosecutors revealed late Thursday that they had arrested an employee of Germany's Foreign Intelligence Service, the BND, over spying for the United States. German authorities added that the detained BND employee is suspected of having spied on a parliamentary inquiry in Berlin into US surveillance on German citizens and politicians. German federal prosecutors opened a criminal investigation last month into US surveillance of Chancellor Angela Merkel's mobile phone. The German probes came in the wake of last year's revelations by US whistleblower Edward Snowden about US and UK spy agencies' surveillance programs. Leaked documents released last October revealed that the US National Security Agency had been tapping Merkel's phone, which provoked outrage in Germany. In addition, Snowden's leaked documents revealed that Britain has been operating a covert listening post within a stone's throw of Germany's parliament and Merkel's offices in the Chancellery, using high-tech equipment housed on the embassy roof. The latest revelation has done nothing to help improve heightened tensions between Berlin and Washington, and in fact threatened to further damage one of the US's most important allies.
2 people were killed when a car bomb exploded near the Somali parliament building in the capital Mogadishu. Al-Shabaab militants, who threatened to step up attacks during the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, claimed responsibility for the blast, which struck a few hundred meters from the presidential compound. Muslims in Myanmar's second largest city have accused police of standing by as a Buddhist mob went on a rampage, torching a school and other buildings. A school and dormitory in the Muslim area of a cemetery on the outskirts of the city of Mandalay were charred and damaged. Several days of violence sparked by rape accusations have left 2 people dead and 14 others injured. Freed Indian nurses who were abducted by extremist militants in Iraq arrived home in Kuchi city in the southern Kerala state on Saturday. The 46 nurses had been stranded in a hospital in the militant-controlled city of Tikrit for weeks, and according to India's foreign ministry, were released on Thursday against their will. Circumstances surrounding the nurses' release remain unclear, and the foreign ministry said it could not divulge any details. In Sudan, the holy month of Ramadan has a slightly different feeling. Apart from fasting prayers, religious classes and open-air iftar feasts, works of charity and other voluntary fundraising events are common in the 30 million strong nation, where Muslims make up the overwhelming majority of the population.
Every year, Muslims all over the world mark the holy month of Ramadan, the 9th month of the lunar calendar. Ramadan is the holiest occasion of the year, culminating in the grand festival of Eid al-Fitr.
There are a number of ways of social solidarity throughout Ramadan, including the fasting people's gift bags, charity provided to the poor, and clothes to those in need.
In Ramadan, Muslims come together for a lengthy evening prayer known as Taraweeh, which is not normally a part of everyday prayers. In Ramadan, Muslims seek the satisfaction of Allah Almighty through different worship acts, including fasting, which they break around sunset. And in Sudan, that is done in a spectacular and unrivaled fashion. Exercising religion in Sudan is the same as in every Muslim country. However, there are different traditions which only the Sudanese practice. Families take their food and choose a spot on the public street alongside 20 or 30 other families from their neighborhood, sit on opposing sides and break their fast upon Maghrib prayers.
This is a Sudanese habit that has been entrenched in Sudanese traditions for ages. We find that the Sudanese around breakfast time stop people on the roads and streets so that they can host these passers-by. This is an integral part of the Sudanese generosity. The purpose of eating out is to allow passers-by and those who have not yet made it home to have a place where they could break their fast. This does not only take place in local roads, but in highways as well. Maybe half an hour before breakfast time at sunset, highways become almost impossible to travel through, given that they will be blocked by people who invite you, a traveler, to eat with them. This is one of the traditions that will never disappear despite any circumstance that may arise.
What used to be a traditional habit is now turned into a charitable practice. Organizations are now on the scene providing help during Ramadan.
Several people need a meal during the month, and that is how the idea came into being, the idea of using collective iftar as an organized effort for charity.
The activity of such charities is geared up to include more places in the future.
We want to focus our effort in the future on including prisons and major hospitals on our target list.
Eating and drinking after a long day is a joy. However, doing so with such company is even merrier. Ahmed Saeed Ahmed, Al-Ittijah News Channel, Khartoum.
Now a reminder of our top stories. Palestinian resistance groups launch a new volley of rockets into Israeli settlements in retaliation for Israeli aggressions. The Iraqi government disputes a video posted online purporting to show the so-called leader of the Islamic State, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And the self-defense forces of the Donetsk People's Republic confirmed leaving the eastern Ukrainian city of Slavyansk after a devastating shelling. That's it for today. Have a good night.